everyone. I'm Dr. Patti Peeples with the Peeples Collaborative, and welcome to the next episode of Patti's People, sponsored by the Evidence Base. My guest today is Dr. Melanie Whittington. Mel, as she is known by, is the managing director and head of the Leerink Center of Pharmacoeconomics, which is a division of MEDACorp and an affiliate of Leerink Partners. In this role, she leads pharmacoeconomic evaluations of the societal impact of biopharmaceutical innovations. And she's also a senior fellow with the Center for the Evaluation of Value and Risk, or CEVR, as you probably know it, at Tufts Medical Center, where she's interested in testing novel health economic methods. Welcome, Mel.
Thank you. I'm honored to be here. I've listened to this for many times, so it's a true delight. Thank you.
Well, today we're going to be talking about a unique subject, which is bridging the gap for health technology investment and assessment. And you sit at a very unique intersection in your current role between health economic modeling, public policy, and private investment. Now, can you tell us, how do these worlds inform each other in your day-to-day work? What kind of gap are you attempting to bridge? And maybe can you start out with telling us about the individual company and your affiliate, and then what your role is?
Yeah, great questions. I'm still trying to figure out every day as well. But I have now been at the Leerink Center for Pharmacoeconomics for 1 year. So that's kind of an exciting milestone. We are a division of MEDACorp, which is affiliated with Leerink Partners. Leerink Partners is a healthcare investment bank. And so I like the word bridge that you used. And I really am trying to be this bridge between the development stage of the biopharmaceutical ecosystem and then kind of the commercialization stage of the biopharmaceutical ecosystem. And, I think when we think of pharmaceuticals, we probably think of the big pharmaceutical companies, the direct-to-consumer ads on our televisions, maybe payers or insurance company, and, maybe like the pharmacy, because that's where we're picking up our prescriptions. But the biopharmaceutical ecosystem is so much broader than that. There's a lot of players. And I think less maybe, the general population or general American public is less aware of what it takes to develop one of those drugs. And it takes a lot of players. And so on that development side, you have a lot of private investment companies, venture capital, but small biotech companies. Okay, so the development side, and there's even more players than I've mentioned, but so the development side is huge and really important. And on the commercialization side, of course, we have large pharmaceutical companies, we have payers, we have pharmacies, all these things that we typically think of. But we also have health technology assessment groups, pharmacy benefit managers, all of these other players. And then over all of this, we have health policy that can really impact all of these things. And so I want to be exposed to all of those different players. I want to be kind of a liaison or a bridge to help us really think about the entire ecosystem. And, I would love to inform kind of the development side of the ecosystem, certain things that are happening in health policy that might be relevant to them, certain things going on in kind of trends of commercialization, such as value-informed pricing or government price negotiation, those kinds of things. I would love to inform that side of the ecosystem about some of those things. And then on the flip side, I would love to inform kind of the commercialization, value assessment, health policy side about the incentives required to get these innovations and the importance of market dynamics and preserving those incentives. So that's a little bit about what we're doing, but I'm still trying to figure it out. It's definitely a rapidly evolving role.
So Mel, give me an example of an affiliate or a group that you work with internally that is seeking your information that may be representative of an organization or a division that has previously not thought about the kinds of things that you share. Who are you informing differently than has been typical?
Yeah, that's a great question. And it really varies of I try to think about questions I try to think about providing information to different stakeholder groups before they even know that they have a question. And so a lot of the work that I try to put out is kind of forecasting or thinking what people might not know and maybe they should know. And so thinking about, um, what about the incentives for innovation or market dynamics? These aren't things that you're talking about at the dinner table, right? So trying to put that information out publicly, kind of in more of a lay press conversational tone to really bring these conversations to the forefront. And so this could be, to policymakers thinking about what incentives are required for innovation. It could be early life science companies about what types of secondary endpoints could you add to your randomized controlled trials to really speak to the value of your product? And when I say value there, I mean really to the health system and to society. And so I'd say a lot of my work is more trying to be proactive and thinking about providing evidence for questions that people might not even know that they have yet.
Yeah. And so for investors, are they interested? Are they aware of how public policy could truly impact the health technology products that they're looking to acquire or fund? Is that even in their ecosystem? And I suppose that's exactly what you're trying to do. But are you having to educate on the need and then educate on the what? Or are they already aware of the need and that they ought to know about this stuff?
I would say the investors are very aware of health policy and the impact that that could have on bringing an innovation to market because an investor has to think about the environment that a product could be launched in. And so they're thinking many years ahead. And so that's the challenge when there are a lot of, policy changes or uncertainty in policy. It becomes challenging to know like what is the environment going to look like um, when that product could be launched.
Across your career, you have really moved across some of the most influential institutions that are existing in healthcare, from ICER to your current position of Leerink to now with your responsibility as an advisor for the Congressional Budget Office. What's the common thread that connects these chapters in your life?
Yeah, great question. I did an exercise a couple years ago of this kind of career map. And, your career, in my opinion, should not be defined about by one single affiliation or one job, but your career is really who you are. And so at the center of this map was like me and who I, want to be professionally. And so at the center of this map was like Mel Whittington, pharmacoeconomist, who wants to use evidence and economics to promote an efficient and incentivized biopharmaceutical ecosystem. And so that's kind of it sounds kind of selfish, I suppose, but like that's the common thread is like me and what I'm trying to achieve through my career. And, I think to do that well, to be kind of that best version of what I want to be professionally, I need exposure to a lot of different elements within that biopharmaceutical ecosystem. And, I started out in academia and could kind of at an academic medical center, so kind of could see the academic environment. And then I spent time at ICER, the Institute for Clinical and Economic Review, which is kind of a HTA-like body in the United States. And so I could grapple with really tough questions related to resource allocation of pooled healthcare dollars. And now being affiliated with Leerink Partners, I get to engage a lot with investors and early life cycle companies, learn about incentives for innovation, learn about market dynamics, learn about that kind of development process. And so the common thread I want is I just want to be exposed to all of these different things to really become the best pharmacoeconomist that I can be, I suppose.
So I've heard you say in other discussions that you're truly a modeler at heart. I assume that was on your career map at some point. But how does the traditional CEA approach that we use in our HEOR world, how does that diverge from the kinds of risk-adjusted net present value modeling that is done by investors? And where's the opportunity for us to bridge those two worlds?
Such a great question. I am a modeler at heart. I love building economic models. It's like people ask what my hobbies are, and I'd say building models. I love to build models. And that has been fun to be exposed to this different industry and see the different types of models that they create. And, models can be really important tools to inform decision making. John Campbell always says they're tools, not rules. And I love that. These are important tools. We always need qualitative deliberation, contextual considerations, et cetera. But these can be really powerful tools to inform decision making. And, so I've used that on kind of the economic modeling, cost effectiveness analysis side of things. And, being observing how some investors make their decisions and these risk adjusted net present value models that you allude to. I love the use of models to inform decisions. Now, the economic models like cost effectiveness analyses, which are my babies, are very different from, say, a risk adjusted net present value model. And they should be. Like, they're intending to, answer different questions. They're using different endpoints or different inputs. They're typically used at different stages of development. And so they should be separate models. But there are some commonalities, like price. The drug's price is instrumental to both of those models. And there's some underlying assumptions that are really different in price between those models. So in cost effectiveness analyses, which are my babies, it's common to keep price constant over the time horizon of the model. And the time horizon of the model is usually like the average patient's lifetime. There's some variation here, of course, but it's pretty typical to see a patient lifetime time horizon for a cost effectiveness analysis, and that drug's price is kept constant over that time horizon. Looking at risk-adjusted net present value models, again, I'm not as familiar with those, but the time horizon there is usually like the product lifetime, right? It's not a patient lifetime, but it's kind of more of a product lifetime. And the net price of the product changes over time. They do consider patent periods, price changes over that patent period, price changes after the patent period. And so I think there are real opportunities to make similar assumptions on similar parameters. And so that's where I get really into kind of what we're calling dynamic pricing or accounting for price changes over time in cost effectiveness analyses. So that was selfishly one of my interests to, start a role as I am in today. Is I am passionate about incorporating price dynamics into cost effectiveness analysis. And so I want to learn from folks who have been doing this in their own models for a long time.
So adjusting with dynamic pricing doesn't seem that hard of a leap for a traditional HEOR model, but would incorporating net present value assessment on the value of the project itself, either to the company who's sponsoring it or to society, is that an area that you think HEOR modelers should begin to incorporate?
Yeah, that's interesting. I haven't thought too much about that of, like, should HEOR, HTA be doing their own net present value models? I think a next logical step would be, how do we take our own, when I say we, I mean like HEOR, I still identify in the HEOR world. How do we take our models and make them a little bit more realistic? And we're already forecasting cost. We're already projecting cost many years in the future. Let's acknowledge that prices change for drugs. Drugs are unique in that we have, these specified periods of, patent protection period where competition is less. There can still start to be branded competition. And then after the patent protection period, when generic competition or biosimilar competition can enter. So I think our next step should be, let's look at cost effectiveness analyses. Is there a way to make the cost forecasting a little bit more realistic?
I think it's something to explore in our field, particularly with some of the challenges that we're experiencing on whether or not the HEOR, RWE, predominantly HEOR divisions are bringing the value that we hope. Then perhaps opening our minds to some of these risk-based NPV assessments may give another perspective on the value of the work. So I think you
Yeah.
bring a unique perspective to that, to our industry.
Yeah, I think one challenge with that is, when a cost effectiveness analysis is done, it's typically on a product that has already, recently been approved or is likely expected to be approved. We often don't see, cost effectiveness analyses on all of the products that never make it to approval. And, so I think if you look at those that are, commercial successes, we're not looking at, those that never made it to that. And so it's this level of portfolio thinking that I've been, one of my moments of learning over this last year is when I build an economic model, I'm still very much focused on kind of one product. And that one product is typically one that's going to be marketed. I'm not thinking like this portfolio thinking of, investment decisions being made years before anything was marketed often.
Let's talk a little bit about continuing this conversation on value. Let's talk about the value flower. Um, let's say that you're the gardener in charge of planting value flowers. Uh, what petals are on there that you think are maybe not as important or may need to be rethought? And what petals are missing in your
Yeah.
perspective?
Well, we kind of did this. There's been multiple iterations of that beautiful ISPOR value flower. And about a year ago, 12 health economists, I was fortunate to be one of them, created this very digestible and readable 88-page best practice report on, and we kind of created our own adaptation of the ISPOR value flower. It's taken many iterations, which I think is amazing. I think that's what our field as methodologists we should be doing. We should be constantly evolving and improving our past work. And so we kind of created our version of the ISPOR value flower. To the point about removing any, I personally would not remove any. I think, the more evidence, the better. I am not a decision maker about these, resource allocation decisions. And so I love the idea of just presenting a lot of information and then letting decision makers figure out what they want to prioritize versus not. So I wouldn't remove any. Now, adding, there are two that was in this version of the kind of our value flower, done with a lot of support and work from the No Patient Left Behind group, was there's two petals that I'm particularly, committed to figuring out, and that's dynamic pricing. So this fact that prices change over time. And then along with that, a petal we call dynamic prevalence. But that's really methodologically like stacked cohorts. So this concept that a drug's price does change over time. That could be in the intervention arm or your comparator arm, right? Like this isn't only in the intervention arm, it's in both arms. Those prices change over time. And relatedly, putting in stacked cohorts acknowledges that not everybody starts the drug at launch, but there is, utilization and starts over that product lifetime. And so those two petals really encompass this dynamic CEA nature of, all right, prices change. So let's account for changes in price per cohort, but then also let's stack multiple cohorts and expand the time horizon, really from a patient lifetime time horizon to a product lifetime time horizon. And I think those two steps align some of the assumptions between kind of the risk-adjusted net present value models and the cost-effectiveness analyses, and aligning kind of the time horizon and how those costs might change over time.
So, in your role with the Congressional Budget Office, tell us a little bit more about what your responsibility is on the panel of health advisors and what kinds of perspectives are you hoping to bring to the table?
Yeah. So talk about an honor of a career to be selected to be, on that panel of health advisors for the Congressional Budget Office. This is all brand new for me, so I don't know um, uh, too much about it yet, but except that I'm honored to be a part of it. And, I think the perspective that I hope to bring is I know that I have been really lucky to be affiliated with some amazing and diverse organizations. And so I want to kind of share the learnings that I've had from those organizations. Speaking specifically to my current role, I do get to, engage and hear from investors and development stage companies. And, how can I take the lessons that I learned from them about the incentives that are required for innovation, market dynamics, those kinds of things? How can I share those lessons? And I think we all want an efficient and incentivized biopharmaceutical industry. And so I just hope to be kind of a liaison to be able to share things that I've learned with others. And so I hope to bring that to this panel of health advisors.
Dig a little deeper on the investor's perspective on the incentives for innovation. Tell me more about that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm certainly not an investor, but from the information that I've read or individuals I've engaged, there really is a desire for certainty. Okay, knowing what the environment is going to look at. Uncertainty is not a great thing. Um, and in the United States, we've built this successful biopharmaceutical research industry with market-based pricing and innovations defined by patent protection periods. And we have things like Hatch-Waxman that set certain rules for the industry to operate and certain expectations for investment decisions and for commercialization strategies, et cetera. And so when those rules of the game change, that is challenging. And so I'd say, in the US, the kind of status quo was market-based pricing for a patent protection period.
With respect to those incentives, as the policies do evolve, IRA drug pricing reforms, et cetera, we've read a lot about unintended consequences, and particularly on the long-term horizon for that. In your opinion, are we in the right place in striking a balance between cost containment and future innovation? What should we be doing differently?
Yeah, all of these questions are hard. I don't think we have figured out how to manage kind of short-term shocks in budgets or in prices that might happen with pharmaceutical innovation when we get new innovation. I don't think we've managed the ability to, pay for those things, especially when there's this promise for, huge long-term returns. And, I recently wrote a commentary with Kirsten Axelson. We're looking at this in the lens of kind of the coverage for obesity treatments. And, we said in that commentary that kind of the lack of coverage for the GLP-1s offers this, warning indicator of our system's inability to forecast long-term cost savings and then make the investments needed to achieve them. And so, I think biopharmaceutical innovation is unique in that, let's look at, some small molecules where generics will eventually enter, drop down the price dramatically, and it could actually result in cost savings to the health system. But there is a period initially where we have to, pay back the investors and pay back the innovators before, this can be generic and cheap. And so there is this period where prices are likely going to be high. I kind of say that with air quotes, but prices are going to be high, but we have to pay for that to get these long-term returns. And I don't think our system is set up well to, figure out how do we account for those short-term increases in the budget to be able to get the long-term returns.
Do you anticipate any of the conversations at the CBO will be focused on the patient's perspective, or is this predominantly going to be representative of the innovation and development arena?
Yeah, I am not for sure.
You've published across the full spectrum, from academic journals to commentaries like you're speaking about now, and to articles in press outlets. Uh, in your perspective, what makes healthcare evidence stick? And we're certainly in an arena where we're grappling, pardon me, with evidence and the quality of the evidence, or the perceived lack of quality of evidence.
Mhm.
Why is some data persuasive and some ignored?
Yeah, great question. um, I've thought a lot about this, and I think in kind of our world of health policy or health economics, a lot of it is trying to think ahead of what the problem is going to be and then generating evidence way before that becomes a problem. And so that has some interesting considerations, because maybe, I don't think there's anything I've released that's been like, it has to be released today because this is going to make an impact today. It's more like creating this repository of evidence that could be informative in the future. So it needs to exist. Good, rigorous, robust evidence needs to exist. I think it's ideal if it is proactive rather than being reactive to already like some law. We have to be proactive, and kind of forecast what potential problems could be and generate evidence ahead of time. And so another kind of issue with that is making a direct link to like, how was that evidence used, or how was that evidence important? Because sometimes it's hard to observe the counterfactual, like what would have happened if that evidence didn't exist. And so, I think the best evidence is proactive, that we're really thinking in the future about what problems do we need answers to, and answering them before solutions have already come up with limited evidence. And then, I do think some of it is not, the impact might not be immediate, that you could be putting out evidence that that day might not get read, might not be used, but its existence is important and then could be used in the future. And so I think that's something that makes our work a little bit different.
Yeah. In terms of health equity specifically, what are we still missing in terms of our conversations around health equity as it relates to HEOR specifically? Now, what I'm talking about here is increasingly that's being woven into traditional HEOR evaluations, but in different ways and in different levels and in different adaptations. What are we still missing in terms of how we incorporate the equity conversation into our research?
Yeah, I'm glad you brought this up, because this is so important, and also an area where I think HEOR has really um, acknowledged a limitation and then come up with good methods and good data to be able to address it. So I said I love economic models. I do. I love cost effectiveness analyses. I love building economic models. They often are used more to inform efficiency. We all know efficiency isn't the only thing that matters. There are other things that matter, equity being one of them. In iterations of the ISPOR value flower, we have equity as a petal. There are methods to quantitatively incorporate equity into these models, like distributional cost effectiveness analysis. And there's been a lot of champions in the US and internationally, and really bringing these methods and these data to be able to do these methods, making all of this possible. I want to shout out Stacy Kowal, who has really led the kind of evidence generation that's needed for distributional cost effectiveness analysis in the US. She also started a special interest group at ISPOR dedicated to health equity that has been tremendously productive, and really creating the methodological awareness and the data to be able to do these types of methods. I think what's missing is like the implementation and the interpretation of it. Of, okay, how do we consider equity? Is this something that goes into a higher price for a drug? Is this some other type of benefit? But I think our field will grapple with those things. It will figure those things out, and it's been really pretty remarkable to watch the methods and the evidence base, and really like the data required to be able to do this evolve very rapidly over the last few years.
Is equity going to be a dirty word that we need to reframe so that it is not targeted in the same way that some of the arenas of diversity, equity, and inclusion are being targeted? How do we need to talk about this in our field so that the importance of it is protected and nurtured?
Yeah, I still think that's where evidence is really important. I clearly think equity is important, and generating evidence. I think it's important to inform those challenging conversations.
You have been in academia, nonprofit consulting, and now in the financial services sector. You have achieved some really significant things in our industry. I know you are admired for your innovation and your courage in many of your pursuits. What advice would you give women entering this space based on your career path?
Yeah, I mean, thank you. And I think this career path is terrific for anybody. But it is one where there's been a lot of women leaders in HEOR and health economics and pharmacoeconomics, and also some just amazing men as well who are terrific allies. Going back to an IS4 special interest group, there's a women in HEOR special interest group. And so, speaking specifically to women and men, because I think they're called cool guy allies, I would encourage participation in that. And IS4 does some really phenomenal things to make sure, a diversity of voices are represented. I think early career advice that I give to anybody is stop thinking about like your dream career. All of those interview questions that you're told about, practically by the time you enter school about, what's your 10-year plan or what's your dream job? It's like nobody knows those things. Think about the next 3 years, okay? And then just continuously think about that. You don't need to know everything. Think 3 years ahead of time. And then for me personally, I always find it really important to protect my 5 to 9s, my 5 a.m. to 9 a.m.s, my 5 p.m. to 9 p.m.s. And when I say protect those, I really mean like I assign, this is going to sound a little too like nerdy economist, but I assign a very high opportunity cost to those time periods. Yeah. Do I work at those time periods at times? Yes, absolutely. Like, do I do work dinners? Do I have to, continuously answer emails, things like that? Yes, I do. But I do protect those times a little bit different than other hours in my day where I assign a pretty high opportunity cost to them. About if I am going to do something in those windows, I really think about like, what benefit am I going to get from this? Is it worth it? Can it wait? And so that's helped me. I have 2 young kids. And so that's helped me kind of really be fulfilled professionally and in the choices I've made in my personal life.
Great advice. Let's move to our rapid fire.
Okay.
This is a series of short answer questions just to get your gut reaction.
Okay.
What excites you most about our industry right now?
The EPIC Act.
What keeps you up at night?
My dogs. You might have heard them at the beginning of this podcast. I have 2 gigantic Bernese Mountain Dogs who this is their lunchtime walk time. So
they're saying that there's some opportunity cost to them not getting their walk, I think.
Yeah.
And if we were to have this discussion in 5 years, what are we going to be talking about?
Dynamic pricing and the base case of cost effectiveness analyses.
Okay. So here's a fun dinner party question. Let's say you're hosting a dinner party, Mel, and you've got 6 seats, 3 people from your professional life and 3 from anywhere, past, present, or future. Who's coming and what are you serving?
Okay, so I wish I could come up with this, like, these 6 people from different players in the biopharmaceutical ecosystem, right? That all comes together and we like solve all of our problems. But I also believe in authenticity and I believe in protecting my 5 to 9s. And so I love a family dinner. It has to be something pretty great for me to miss a dinner with my husband and 2 kids. And so if I have 6 seats, those 3 are filling 3 of the 6. Um, and then so I'm like, okay, who would I really want at a dinner table with my husband and 2 kids? And so I immediately think of the first 3 from my professional life. Who would I want there? I think of the first 3 pharmacoeconomists I met. I met them before I even had my babies, met them before I was married. And that's John Campbell, Brett McQueen, and Bill Padula. Brett McQueen and Bill Padula like treated me like a little sister, took me under their wing on the conference circuit, and introduced me to everybody. John Campbell's the reason I have a career. And so if I had to have a dinner, it would be Brett, John, Bill, and then my husband Nick and my 2 kids.
And what are you going to be serving?
Okay, well, if Brett's going to show up, it's going to have to be a cheeseburger. So we'll have cheeseburgers. For Bill to show up, it'd have to be red wine. And John would show up no matter what. So cheeseburgers and red wine.
That's a winning dinner from all around. And if you were not in the world of health economics, what do you think you'd be doing right now?
That's a good question. I think a lot about like what would be my dream job? And I not trying to undersell what I'm currently doing. I am, really fortunate in my career. I love what I'm doing. But if I was to do something totally different outside of HEOR, I think I would be a librarian. and I love books. I love reading. I love creating like organization systems. I like helping people. I like creating community events. I love the smell of a library, love the smell of a used book. And I still visit our public library probably at least once a week. And so I'm going to say librarian.
Well, as a daughter of a librarian, I approve that message.
Oh, that's so cool. That's so cool.
Well, Mel, I want to thank you so much for this interview, for your authenticity and your transparency. And as I said before, and it's worth saying again, for your courage. I think you are a really great example for the opportunities that exist off of the standard path of an HEOR researcher. And I think you bring your ethos and your methods and your rigor for evidence to these new roles. And you sit at this intersection that really needs to be bridged. And I, for one, am really glad you're the representative of that.
Oh, thank you, Patti. I'm trying to figure it out. We'll see.
Yeah, aren't we all? Listen, thank you, Mel.
Thank you.